So hello there, welcome to our set of shows. I've already technical issues before we started, so hopefully I won't be too flustered. It's just one of those things, I'm just having one of those days already. So my first video is going to be about two different Sherlock Holmes films that were created in the 1970s. Now these are not the only two Sherlock Holmes films done in the 70s I mean, but these are the two more famous ones. There's other ones like Murder by Decree and Study in Terror, which also were released, which I'm not covering. I'm just going to cover The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes and The 7% Solution. Now, these are two films that a lot of us probably saw when we were on TV, when we were kids, and then probably forgot about it. They were just Sherlock Holmes films, amongst other Sherlock Holmes films. They were a bit weirder, but the thing about these films is these are the ones that kind of influenced the next wave of Sherlock Holmes. They kind of came in like the 2000s and 2010s with Sherlock Holmes movies and Sherlock Holmes, the Sherlock TV show and Elementary and things. These are the films, and a lot of the books kind of got influenced by these films. Now, the 7% Solution was based on a book as well, which is also very influential. So these were situations where these kind of revisionist takes on Sherlock Holmes, it still had a lot of affection for Sherlock Holmes, came out and said there's another way to see this person. Now, before this, the idea of Sherlock Holmes was Basil Rathbone. Now, there were other versions like Peter Cushing that were a bit more colder and more logical, and Basil Rathbone was the intellectual, but also had a sort of softer side. But for most people, Basil Rathbone was Sherlock Holmes. And then, over a certain amount of time, these films came out, and then Jeremy Brett became Sherlock Holmes for a lot of people, because Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes was done in the 1980s. That took a little bit from this, but was still very logical, very much based on the being legitimate and focused on stories themselves. But Jeremy Brett brought a little bit more neurosis to the character, but not too much. Just enough there just to show the influence of these films. Then as it went on, it was like, is Sherlock Holmes really a great detective, or is he a lunatic? And these two films were of the opinion of very much a genius, but he was an addict to his various problems of dealing with people, and idea of how to deal with logic and deal with emotions. And he was kind of addicted to the chase. So there was other stuff, more psychological stuff that as human beings we can relate to in a way that you can't really relate to Sherlock Holmes. You relate to Watson, who's the human part of the equation, who's telling stories. And most people who read Sherlock Holmes stories probably relate to Watson more than Sherlock Holmes, because we're more like Watson generally in life. So that was the entry point for the Sherlock Holmes stories was Watson. And these 70s films still kept Sherlock at a distance. He was still a person who could be very distancing to people, who could say things that were very hurtful and all of that. And Watson would sort of smooth things over, but he was a genius. But these ones were much more like what makes him tick. But these were made by fans of Sherlock Holmes. I mean, Billy Wilder, who did The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, was a fan of Sherlock Holmes. Nicholas Meyer, who wrote the book The 7% Solution, was a major fan of Sherlock Holmes, and he's written more Sherlock Holmes books since then. And so there was an affection for the character, even though they're saying, like, okay, there's things you can look into here that are kind of interesting. You can do alternative versions of these stories. So Billy Wilder, in his film The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, which I'll cover first, he went into the idea that there were some cases of Sherlock's that were not put in the Strand magazine stories by Watson for various reasons. One, it was be publicly embarrassing for some people involved. Another one, it was national secrets. There was apparently two more short stories in here as well that were meant to be in here that would have given more more variation as well, but that would have made the film a 3-hour film, and they wanted to cut down to 2 hours, so certain scenes were lost to time, and we're never getting them back. But there were other stories, and the idea was like Sherlock Holmes had a life beyond the stories we see, and in one of the stories he gets things wrong badly. In another story he has to lie to get out of a problem. So the first story is him getting dragged to the opera by Watson, and the ballet by Watson. The ballet dancer wants Holmes to impregnate her so that she can have a child, so the child will be looking as beautiful as her and as basically smart Sherlock Holmes. Which was the joke is, well, it's the other way around. You know, who knows what happened there. But it's one of those slight stories where Holmes suggests he's gay just to get out of it. He's not really interested in women. And a lot of the big thing about this film is, like, what's going on with Holmes and Watson, what's going on with Holmes and women. Because obviously he's a distrust of them, but there's also an affection for certain women as well, in his own way. And so it's kind of looking at some of the kind of spikier sides of Sherlock Holmes. Like, is he actually gay or is he not? And later on, Wilder said he should have been more obvious with the gay stuff and suggest he actually was, but for finance, and he had to kind of smudge it a little bit. So that's the early part of the film, is this thing where you see Holmes actually just lying through his teeth to try and get out of this situation he doesn't want to get into. Then the second story that takes up most of the film, which is this idea of this woman who was basically almost murdered. She can't remember anything, and she's trying to remember. She turns out she's looking for her husband, and Holmes and Watson try and help her find her husband, with all these people trying to kill her apparently, and it's a mind game through British intelligence and German intelligence, and this is before the war, while Victoria's still alive, and there's a lot of nuances to it. Mycroft's in it, and it involves the Loch Ness Monster and lots of other things. Now the thing about Billy Wilder is, he's a Holmes fan, but he's not a Holmes writer in a sense of he can write the character, he can write jokes. But the mystery itself, I always find kind of obvious where it was going. Like, I think it's a wonderful film, but I was never like thinking, well, what's going to happen next? I don't see where this is going. I always had a sense of where this film was going, which for when I was younger was like a demerit for it. It was like Sherlock Holmes story that wasn't actually that mysterious, but it's still a very good film. Robert Stevens as Holmes is very good. The Watson's a bit too buffoonish for me. He's a bit too much like Nigel Bruce. He's not full on Nigel Bruce, like real buffoonish, but he's a bit clueless at times, and he doesn't pay attention in the ways that, if you read the books, you feel Watson's paying attention a lot more. And so their Watson is someone who is a version of Watson that I'm not so keen on. So that's another demerit for me. I think Watson's played for laughs too much. But there's some nice stuff. There's Christopher Lee's Mycroft, who's terrific. There's lots of good supporting parts. There's some nice Scottish scenery. There's a nice sense of mood throughout the film. The humour is different from normal Holmes stuff, but it gives a more human touch. So even though there's a basic problem with the mystery's not that mysterious, all the stuff around it is really good and really well made, and the ending's very haunting, and it's a wonderful, beautiful film. It's just that if you're going to go to Sherlock Holmes film for a great mystery, you're going to be disappointed, because it's not a great mystery. It's a fairly obvious mystery. Which is the problem when you go away from the Conan Doyle stories a lot of the time, is if they try and do their own mystery, it turns out that these are harder to write than you'd think. So, because Conan Doyle made it look so easy, when actually there was a lot of detail to do to change of where I was looking for when a story was going on to keep you from figuring it out. There's, it's more difficult than it looks. But Private Life of Sherlock Holmes is a flawed but wonderful film. The ending is wonderful. There's lots of wonderful things in it. But it's one of those films, if someone says they love it, I get it. And if someone says, I don't think they have that one, I get it as well, because it is a slightly odd film. Now we're going to 7% Solution, which actually was my favourite of the two films. I know Solitary Ronin will probably be appalled when he hears that one, since he's a big Billy Wilder fan, but I like 7% Solution more. First of all, I think Nico Wilson's a better Holmes than Robert Stevens. Robert Stevens is more of a comedy Holmes in some ways. Nico Wilson's a tortured Holmes. He's more than Jeremy Brett was going to take it. He's more of a tortured guy who has lots of problems, but he's still very, very smart. And so he's great at switching between the neurotic Holmes to the adventurer Holmes who is in the thrill of the adventure and figuring things out. And you also have a great idea in this one about Sherlock Holmes meets Sigmund Freud, and you find out that the story of the final solution was with Moriarty was made up to hide the fact that Sherlock was actually going to disappear to Europe for a couple of years to get himself back together after a very bad, addiction to cocaine. And it's like looking into the inner life of Sherlock Holmes and saying, why has he got this problem? Because he says it's to get the boredom out of the boredom, but it's like, well, that's just an easy excuse. And I mean, the Private Life of Sherlock Holmes hints that's an easy thing, but this one probes a little bit more towards, this is a cop-out. And as the film goes on, you start to get more clues. Again, this is one I could figure out where it was going for the clues for why Sherlock was the way he was. You can't figure it out, but it's done really well. I would say that they over-egg certain things early on to give you clues, and they could have pulled it back a little bit more early on, and it would be more satisfying, but still, it works. And one of the nice things here is, it's also written by a fan who knows all the details, so there's lots of fun stuff about how Watson gets Holmes to Vienna to see Sigmund Freud, how he tricks someone to make it a mystery, and he's chasing Moriarty when he's really not. He's chasing to get to a location that's getting him to Freud so he can actually get the help he needs. So there's a mystery where Holmes thinks he's ahead and he's the one who follows behind. So Watson uses Holmes' tricks against him because he knows him so well. Which is a nice thing that Watson knows Holmes that well, he can trick him. And Mycroft helps as well to trick him to get him there, because Mycroft's concerned too. Now, Watson in this film is played by Robert Duvall with not the best British accent, but Duvall does play Watson as a very serious guy who's... I liked him more than Blakely, to be honest. I think he was he's more like Watson, even though the accent is a bit of a problem. But he was probably brought in to help with financing. Alan Arkin plays Freud, and Alan Arkin was also a big name at the time, so I think Arkin and Duvall were the names that got the film made. That allowed him to cast Nico Wilson as Holmes, who was a well-known actor but not a star. And Nicholas Williamson is just a terrific Holmes. He's just so good, and all the details are right. And going from scene to scene, he's always on point for what's needed. So as the story goes on, the second half, as Freud treats Holmes and starts to get through to him that he's dodging lots of things in his life, that if he doesn't figure this out in some way, at least to a degree, he'll keep repeating these mistakes. So it's that thing of making him take care of himself and see what's seriously getting at him. And so the second half, you get our adventure with Vanessa Redgrave as this singer who's getting kidnapped by this Duke of the Ottoman Empire, and it's a race to save her. which leads to a great scene, a train chase where they have to keep the train going, have to destroy some of the carriages behind them to use the wood to keep the train going. Which is a wonderful moment in the film. That's Holmes' solution to running out of fuel, is to destroy the train behind him. And there's some wonderful stuff here. Again, like the Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, the mystery's not as good as a Conan Doyle mystery, but it's better than the Private Life of Sherlock Holmes for the mystery. The mystery's a bit more to it, really. It's a bit darker and it's a bit seedier and it's a bit more punch to it, even though you can't figure where it's going. But it does lead to some very good scenes and very fun, like, face-offs between different kind of characters. And it allows you to see Freud in a Sherlock Holmes story and see him enjoying himself. And it allows Alan Arkin to show Freud as a more complicated character than the image we have of him. So, even though Nicholas Meyer more or less admitted that his Freud is more or less based on his dad rather than Freud. But it makes an interesting character, anyway. And the film just works. The film just works wonderfully. It's well directed. It's from the same director as The Last of Sheila, which is also another really good mystery story with a sense of adventure and humour. All the scenes work. The conclusion of why Holmes the way he is nicely done, and it ties back into Moriarty and why he's after Moriarty. And it's tragic, and it's like, and you can see why he's repressed it. But it's all, everything's well done. But the biggest thing of this film is Nicky Wilson as Holmes. He's so good as Holmes. It's one of those things, you wish this film had done well so you could get a few more stories of him as Holmes, because he was just so good as Holmes. He was just perfect Sherlock Holmes. He's probably the Sherlock Holmes that doesn't get enough attention when you look at the kind of people playing him, because you only played him once, and usually you have to play him a few times before people will put you in contendership to be a great Sherlock Holmes. But he did one performance and he was so good, and he's still like top 5 Sherlock Holmes for me. So these are 2 good films, well worth watching. They are flawed, but they did progress the character on so that it can be reinvented slightly for the next generation, so they get into Sherlock Holmes stories that was more up to the times and up to people's interests. Like the way they did them in the 40s with Basil Rathbone wouldn't hold the mass audience interest the same way as they did at the time, just because it's different taste and what people want something different. They still want the stories, they just want Holmes to be slightly different to suit the times. So these were the 2 films that kind of pushed them forward out of the past into something we could appreciate. So go see these films, they're wonderful. I'll be back with another video. Bye for now.